back today. If you would, please turn with me to chapter 26 in the book of Matthew. And that's where we will begin this morning. And as we look at verse 1, and it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these things, he said unto his disciples. The last two chapters that we studied most likely took place on Tuesday of Passover week. And he says to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified." Jesus warns the disciples that he would be betrayed on the day of the feast, or the Seder was celebrated. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. Not too far from the temple area, there was another area called the Upper City. This was Snob Hill, where all the bigwigs in town lived in their big mansions. As the high priest, Joseph Caiaphas, had his house here. So that they would not defile the temple, the other important priests, the scribes or the lawyers, the Sanhedrin, the ruling elders, all met together at Caiaphas' house for their discussion. And the discussion went and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, "Not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people." The discussion topic was, how can we get our hands on Jesus, and how can we kill him as quietly and as stealthily as possible? And when would be the best time to do it so that we don't cause a riot? They decided that it would have to be after the feast day, because people would start to go home and there would be less of them around to cause trouble. Now, when Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, we come to a section here that has raised some controversy. Some think that there were two separate but similar occasions here based on whether the feet or the head of Jesus was anointed. We so easily want to pick out little things and pick at them and try to make up things about it, while others think it was only one occasion. We're going to treat it as just one occasion, assuming that both the head and the feet were anointed at the same time, just reported differently among the different gospel writers. And the fact that Jesus' reprimand that he gives to the disciples, complaint, is the same thing in all of the gospels. Matthew steps back in time to the day that Jesus arrives in Bethany before the Passover week begins. He's just told us what the rulers' meeting was about, and Matthew is giving us information about how Judas Iscariot became involved in that plot. Jesus is invited to a dinner at the home of Simon. Jesus had healed many people who had skin diseases known as leprosy, and Simon was one of them. Simon appears to have become a follower of Jesus, and some even say that he was a relative of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. John 12 tells us that Lazarus was at the dinner table and that Martha was in the kitchen. One of the men that we loved to listen to when we were younger was Robert Ketchum. He had been a local pastor and had become highly involved in the controversy, the liberal conservative controversy back in the 30s and the 40s. And one of the times he came to Baptist Bible Seminary and had the chapel. There we go, that was the word I needed. He was there too. He was preaching on the two events here. You know, when Martha was complaining about Mary sitting at Jesus' feet, and he tells her, Martha, you're too busy about all these things. He says, Martha, Martha, you're too busy. But here we have, and then he comes to this one, and where do we find Martha again? In the kitchen. But this time she's singing, I'm so happy, and here's the reason why. So you see the difference in here. Martha just loved to be in the kitchen, like some other people we know around here. So, and other people don't want to be close to it at all. There came unto a woman having alabaster box of the precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. John 12 tells us that the woman here was Mary. The ointment was oil of spikenard that was stored in this alabaster container. Nard, or spikenard, is a pale yellow or amber colored liquid with a heavy, sweet, woody, spicy animal odor, whatever that is, you want this musk stuff. The plant from which it is extracted is grown in the Himalayas and had to be imported, thus making it very expensive. And we're told that the estimated value of this amount that was used was 300 denarii, or about $30,000 to $40,000 into 2023 dollars. Only small amounts of the oil would be used at a time, just like that expensive perfume you bought your wife for Christmas. You know, she just takes a little dab, and that's enough. But, and so in this case, Mary uses it all because of her love for Jesus. When nard was applied to the skin, the odor would linger there for days afterward. This also is an indication that her family was not living in the poorhouse and had access to reasonable sums of money. In fact, this may have even been part of her dowry that she would receive whenever she got married. But his disciples saw it, and they had indignation, saying, to what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. Well, don't accuse the disciples. We would have thought the same thing if we had been sitting there. $30,000 and just pour it on this person? We're told that Judas was the instigator in this. He just wanted to have that money in his pouch with him so that he could embezzle it during the time. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me you have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. We, along with the disciples, here often misjudge the actions of others. Jesus tells them to stop nitpicking because she had done something good for him. Helping the poor is a very good work, but in this situation, Mary acted in a timely fashion, for Jesus would soon no longer be available to do something like this for him. His burial was a rushed job, as we'll see later on, and he would rise up before Mary would have the opportunity to pour this oil on his dead body. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman hath done be told for a memorial of her. And this is the only reason that we even know that Mary did this for Jesus, because he commanded it to be told to us. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priest. That event at the supper was the last straw for Judas. It pushes him to go to the chief priest to make a deal, and said unto them, What will you give me? And I will deliver him unto you. And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. The bargain that Judas makes would bring him 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver would equal 30 tetradrachma, or 4 drachmas each, would roughly be compared to 4 months, or 120 days' wages, which would bring him about $13,000 to $20,000 in today's money. Some people try to think, well, why would Judas want to betray Jesus? And they come up with all different kinds of reasons for it. But I think these verses that we just saw in Matthew here tell us why he did it. He wanted money. He sold the Lord for money. He didn't sell him for some other high political or other aspiration. And from that time, he sought opportunity to betray him. Judas now is constantly looking for a time when Jesus will be away from the crowds of people and that he will always seems to have around him. Remember, the rulers are looking for a place that they can take him in secret. Now, the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare thee to eat the Passover? There's some controversy about exactly what day this was. Some believe that Jesus was crucified on Thursday, and others on Friday. Also, the Galileans had some slightly different traditions than the Judeans, and we'll look at this particular time here from the Thursday interpretation. And if you take the Friday position, just move everything ahead one day. This conversation would then take place on Wednesday morning. We're told that Peter and John were sent to take care of this, so they probably were the ones that were asking him the question. And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, The Master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Jesus had already arranged for a place. Jesus tells Peter and John to find a man carrying a pot of water. This was unusual since women normally would be the ones to get the water. The man takes them to the house, and they speak with the master of the house to have the room arranged for the dinner that evening. They then get all the things needed for the Passover dinner, and they have it cooked. So they're busy all day, these two. Now, when the even was come, he sat down with the 12. Remember, Jewish days begin at sunset, so the day is now the evening of Thursday. All 12 disciples come together with Jesus to the house and recline at the table. Notice that he hadn't told Judas where they were going until the very last minute. He knew what was going on. And as they did eat, he said, "Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me." Jesus casually tells them that one of them was going to betray him to the authorities. And they were exceeding sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, "Lord, is it I?" They were all caught off guard with this announcement, and they all asked him if it was going to be them that did it. No doubt Judas was surprised to hear that Jesus knew what was going to happen and that he was the one. And he answered and said, "He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me." Jesus gives them a cryptic answer. If he had told them exactly who it was, I can just imagine Peter, James, and John beating Judas to a pulp right there at the table. But he gives them this cryptic answer because they've all grabbed a handful of raisins and dipped them in some sauce and eaten them along with Jesus. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Jesus tells them all that this is all in the plan of God and written down by the prophets of old, such as in Psalm 41:9. Yea, my own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. But just as it was in God's plan that this would happen, it did not excuse Judas of what he was about to do. And as Jesus said, it had better been that he had never been born than to have lived to this day and done what he is going to do. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? He said unto him, Thou hast said. Just as John was reclining on Jesus' right hand, I think Judas was at his left hand, where he could whisper, roll over gently and whisper to Jesus this question. And Jesus whispers back to him, You're the one. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. The main portion of the meal was over. The other Gospels tell us Jesus had dismissed Judas to go and do what he was going to do. And John adds some more details to what happens. In John chapter 13, verse 2, he says, And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. And then in verse 26 in John 13, Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto him, that thou doest, do quickly. Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. For some of them thought because Judas had the bag that Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things that we have need of against the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. He then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. Jesus was emphatic that this particular part of the meal was something he had a great desire to do. This act was to be a way for all believers to remember him and what was about to take place. The first part of the ceremony was the breaking of the unleavened bread to represent that he was giving his body to take all the pain of their eternal suffering that they deserved for their sins. It sits here in front of me. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it. And this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remissions of sin. The second part of the ceremony is the cup, representing the blood that he would shed that would take away their sins. Every single one of them. Drink all of it, not some now and some later, but all of it right now. This is a once and for all time transaction. When he died, it was completely finished. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Paul tells us that we do this celebration to remember him until he comes again. And here is his promise that he will come again. I won't drink it again with you until this time when I come again. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. They finished the meal with the traditional singing of Psalm 115 to 118. When the singing was completed, they walked out of the city and went eastward to the Mount of Olives. This would be a quiet place where they could talk together and pray. Then said Jesus unto them, All you shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. God's plan for the coming days and days was for the disciples to forsake him, so he could suffer alone for them and for us. But after his death, there would be resurrection, and they were to meet him in Galilee. Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. Peter said unto him, Though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. Likewise also said all the disciples. Foolish men we all are when we think that we can withstand God's plan for us. Part of God's plan was to protect them from being taken and killed at the same time that Jesus was. Each one of them already had their particular time to suffer when that was assigned to them. Notice that Peter was the first to say that he was not going to forsake the Lord. But the other 10 jumped right in there to add that they weren't going to do it either. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, Sit here, while I go and pray yonder. On the western side of the Mount of Olives was a garden called Gethsemane. The disciples were to sit down and to keep watch, while Jesus went a little further away to pray without distraction. But he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then saith he unto him, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. Jesus took these 3 disciples with him as witnesses to what he would say and do during this prayer. This had been Jesus' normal procedure, as with Jairus' daughter, if you'll remember back then, and on the Mount of Transfiguration. It was these 3 disciples that he took with him in those cases. These 3, perhaps more than the other disciples, felt that something bad was soon to happen, and they began to be sorrowful as they see the sorrow of Jesus at that time. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Jesus knew the intensity of the suffering that was about to happen to him. And as a man, his desire was that he would not have to endure it. But as a faithful son and servant, he was willing to see it through to the very end. And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. It had been a long and busy day for the disciples, and especially Peter and John. And weariness fell on their eyes, and soon they were fast asleep. Don't say that you wouldn't have done it either. I'd have been the first one. Jesus wakes them up and tells them they need to be vigilant, because as Peter will write later, the devil was wandering about trying to tempt them. We all, as humans, have a problem. Our spirit wants to, but our body isn't always able to. And those of us that are getting older and more arthritic every day, we know that. We really want to do stuff, but it just doesn't get done. He went away again the second time and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. Jesus prays a very similar prayer for a second time here. I'm sure that in both of these cases, and even in the third one, he said even more than what we have here, but this is the essential part of what he said. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. The flesh was just too weak for the disciples. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Jesus prays the same thing the third time. There's nothing magical about his praying for the same thing 3 times. Jesus is just certain that the answer to this prayer is, I must do the will of God, and drink the cup until it's empty. We even have a similar event when Paul says that thrice he had prayed for something to be removed. And God had told him, no, it's not going to get removed. And I think that's very similar to what here. Jesus understood for sure that he was going through this. Then cometh he to his disciples and saith unto them, sleep on now, take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. Jesus lets his disciples sleep a while until he knows that the mob is approaching to take him away. And then he awakens them to get them prepared for that event. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. A large number of people who agreed with the chief priests and elders that something needed to be done about Jesus armed themselves and came with some of the temple guards to take Jesus into custody. They are led to the spot by Judas, who knew where to find Jesus. He would know that this would be where Jesus would go after the dinner. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Hold him fast. To make sure they took the right person, Jesus tells them to take the one that he would give a kiss to. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. Judas comes to Jesus and greets him like there's nothing amiss, and gives him a friendly kiss, which was common among friends. Jesus, on the other hand, is particular in his choice of words that is not clear in the word translated as friend here. This is not the Greek word that would be used for a true and faithful friend, but the word that means just another person. We saw this word used before in the parable of the disgruntled laborers and in the parable of the guest without a wedding garment. In both of those cases, the word friend was used to translate it, but it just meant another person that you were greeting along the way. After the identification is made, the guards come and take hold of Jesus and bind him up. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. Peter had a short sword. In another gospel we read that he shows it to Jesus at the feast. And he pulls that out and reacts quickly by swinging it and cutting off Malchus's ear. Fortunately, he missed his throat, which he's probably aiming at, and didn't get the jugular, just caught up on that ear, partially rips it off anyway. Then said Jesus unto him, Put up again thy sword into its place, for all that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Jesus tells Peter to put the sword away before he gets himself into any trouble. He then heals the ear in another gospel to calm things down. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled, that thus it may be? I know we're all familiar with the song 10,000 Angels, but that's incorrect. I mean, not the song proper, but the term 10,000 angels. After his time in prayer, Jesus was determined to fulfill the plan of God. He teaches the disciples who should have witnessed his power and authority in the past, and even just the healing of that ear, that if he wanted to stop what was about to take place, he had access to more than 12 legions of angels. A legion consisted of about 6,000, and 12 of them would have been 72,000 angels instead of 12. In that same hour said Jesus to the multitudes, "Are you come out as against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple. You could, and you laid no hold on me. Why didn't you take me right there? I mean, it would have been an easy job. You wouldn't even have had to march all the way up this hill to get me." But Jesus knew why they hadn't taken him. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. Matthew continues with this theme, that everything that was being done so that all the scriptures could be fulfilled. How many times have you heard that during the book of Matthew so far? And we're going to stop there because I knew this was going to take about 2 days to finish, and this will be a good time to stop. Our Father, we are thankful that you have seen the need for us for a Savior, and you have prepared for us that one. You promised him throughout the Old Testament, and he came and he fulfilled all those promises that you had made. And we know that from fulfillment of those promises, that all the promises that he made to us will soon become true when we see his face again. And we desire that now, that might even be today. And we ask this in Jesus, our precious Lord's name. Amen.